What's up, everybody? Welcome back to NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Buckskin. Now, just a heads up, with this review, I will still be doing my standard fare where I'll be getting into the plot, positives, negatives, and then my rating. But this is going to be kind of a long-winded review because there's so much about this movie that I really want to get into, and I don't think keeping it 15-20 minutes like I do with most of my other reviews is really going to do it justice here. So the things I'll be getting to with this review about this film are going to be getting to some spoiler territory. So if you've never seen the movie and don't want to know anything about the film, I recommend you guys do pause the video right now. It is available for free on YouTube and on Tubi with ads, of course. And you could also purchase it and rent it on Amazon. In fact, you could also still buy it on DVD, which I have right here. I always thought the cover art for this DVD was pretty cool. And I'm going to share about how I came across this movie too, which I think you guys may find interesting. And in fact, I remember I've recently purchased Operation Overlord, which is a film that's written and directed by BrentBentman, who also wrote and directed this movie here. And I think I came across one copy of Buckskin in one of the shelves, if I recall correctly. I kind of breezed right through it, but I think I may have seen the film there. So I do know for a fact there are some Walmarts that will still have a copy of Buckskin out there, at least in this area where I'm at. So hopefully that's like that across the nation here. But again, if you have not seen the film and don't want to be spoiled, you've been warned because I will be getting to a bit of spoilers here for this review in order for me to really share my thoughts and how I felt about certain sequences in the film. And I really can't justify certain things without getting into it in those spoilers here. So you've been warned. But here's what I want to share with you guys about how I came across this movie. So last year, I had done a review for a movie called Whitetail. And it stars Tom Zimbrod, who you see in the cover of this movie, Buckskin, who was also the lead in this movie. I thought he was great in that movie. I really, really enjoyed his performance. And I really thought Whitetail was a great movie. I really did like the film a lot. I had a bit of an issue with the ending, but I really did enjoy the film. So when it came out on DVD last year, I purchased the movie. But I came across Buckskin there as well. And I thought, holy shit, that's the same guy in Whitetail. I'll buy the movie somewhere down the line. So I bought Whitetail and told myself I'll come back to buy Buckskin. Not too long afterwards, our very own Kuya P has sent me an email as saying that, hey, this guy reached out to us. He's a writer-director. Was curious to see if we'd be interested in checking out his movies and possibly do a review. And I was like, yeah, send me the information. I'll have a look and then we'll check it out. He said, all right. So he sent me the email that Brent had sent out. When I opened up the email, one of the first things I saw was a poster for Buckskin. And I said, holy shit, I was going to buy that movie. Yeah, tell him I'll be interested in checking out his films and we'll set something up. And then not too long afterwards, I had posted on Facebook about an episode that I just uploaded on the channel for You're So Cool with Rob and Dina. And Brett had made a comment on there, hey, I would love to be on your show, talk about movies and so on and so forth. I said, yeah, sure, let's set something up. And honestly, I was actually really flattered because, I go out to reach. I reached out to a lot of people to be on the show. You're So Cool with Rob and Dina, and quite a few of them don't respond back. And I'm always grateful for the ones that do. But if I recall correct, I think he was the very first person that actually reached out to me, period, and said, I would love to be on your show. And I was like, oh, really? And I was flattered. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I started messaging him. And then in that conversation on the messaging board, he started sharing some insight about the films he's made. And Buckskin was one of the films he mentioned, that this was a film that was really personal for him. It's the second favorite film that he's ever done. And he shared that he was going through some personal issues at that time, and this was more or less kind of like an outlet for him to be able to, in a lot of ways, I would say, vent out with whatever he was dealing with at that time. And I knew right away that in that conversation, because he was going off a lot, and I'm saying that in a positive manner there. He was like really going to town about telling me everything, and I thought, this is great. This is going to be a great conversation. I knew right away when he started doing that there was going to be so much to talk about with him in the show. And I was looking forward to it, and it was exactly the way I expected it, and then some. So he was on my show last year on You're So Cool, and he shared some more insight about the movie where, again, this was he was going through some personal issues, and this film was basically a way to vent out. He had put through the ringer Tom Zimmer, the lead actor, through something. He basically wore the guy out. And one of the reasons why he had done that is because he had shared that he really wanted to get a real authentic performance out of Zimbrot, and he knew that Zimbrot could do it because this is a guy that has always been very physical. He's a stuntman, does a lot of stunt work in the theme parks and films, among other things as well too. So he knew that he was very much capable of pulling off what's required for this character. But the most important thing that he had told him is that you got to say every word in that script verbatim. You cannot take away or you cannot improvise anything at all. It's got to be word for word. I never asked him why he had done that, but I was just interested in hearing more about what he had put Zimbrot through when it came to this production. And I also noticed too that when I saw the movie for the first time, I didn't finish watching the film the first time. Not because I didn't like it. I was actually something caught my attention that really required for me to step away and handle what needed to be handled at that time. And then I went back to watch the film from where I last left it off. When I saw the movie for the first time, I remember thinking like, what the fuck did I just watch? And I think I may have said that out loud as well too, because I really didn't get the ending. That was the reason why I said that. And when I say that, it's not meant to be a negative towards the movie. I'm not bashing the film by any means when I say that, but I just remember thinking like I had no idea what I saw, because the plot with this movie, which I'll get into in a little bit here, is really simple. It's not a very difficult plot at all. This guy goes into the woods to save a young man, and then he has to bring him back home. That's really what the plot's all about. But there was so much going on with the story that it was a lot for me to kind of process here. And when I saw the movie for the first time, I knew I had to go back and watch it again. So I immediately watched it right after that. And then I got it a little bit better the second time around, but I still had a lot of questions with this movie. So when Brett had shared his experience of making the film and what he had put Zimbrot through, I was more invested with the story and what it was like for everyone to make this film. Like, he really wanted to make the film that he wanted to see. And I believe he definitely did accomplish that with this movie. So, out of all the films that I've seen of Brett's movies, this is the one that I keep going back to the most. I got a copy here of this film on DVD, and I always love the cover art to this for this movie here. But for whatever reason, this is the film that I keep going back to the most, because there was so much to process here that each and every time I go back to watch it, I learn more about the film, or at least I start to get the film more, if that makes any sense. And a lot of it does have to do with the overall story in itself, the cast, the cinematography, the directing, among other things, which I'll get into in my review here with this film. But there's just so much about this movie that I really didn't really understand, but I kept going back to understand the film better. I remember thinking the second time I saw the film that this is not going to be a film for a mass audience. I just knew it right away. And Brett knew that as well, too. We actually had a conversation rather recently, which I'll touch upon later on here, that I remember thinking, like, this is not a film that I could share with my wife and say, hey, honey, let's watch this movie. It's a great film. It's about this fur trapper who's a cook now, and so on and so forth. I knew that in the first 10 minutes, she'll probably watch this film and be like, this is fucking boring, and then not want to watch the rest of it. But I think a lot of it I felt had to do with the fact that even though this movie is about 80 minutes, 81 minutes long, something like that, there's so much going on that, and I think some people may not get it, and as a result of that, may not think very highly of the film because of that. And that's why I felt like it's important for me to really delve into this review pretty in depth here, and there's no other way I feel like I can do that here. So hopefully you guys will endure and appreciate what I'm about to get into here, because it's going to go really deep here. So, of course, I'll be getting into the plot. I will be getting into some spoilers here, of course, and then I will get into my positives, my negatives, and then my rating. Wesley Porter, a Texan fur trapper, journeys into the mysterious Buckskin woods in the hopes of saving a lost boy. Once there, he must confront the demons of his past and navigate the natives' traps in order to bring himself and the young man home alive. And that right there is a film in a nutshell, so now let's get into my positives. The first positive I'm going to point out for me is that I'm trying really hard how I can try to articulate this here, but this movie does have a really great rewatchability factor for me. As I said earlier, when I saw the movie for the first time, I just didn't get it. And again, it's not a negative towards the film. I just really didn't understand what was going on. especially with the way the film ended, I had a lot of questions. So I felt like I had to go back and watch it again to really understand what was going on. And I felt like I understood it a little bit better, but in reality, I really didn't. I have seen this movie well over 20 times. This is the film that I've gone back the most to out of all Brett's films, because I feel like there's so much about this movie that I really did enjoy, but I also felt like there's a lot to process here, because the thing is that when Brett had discussed about whatever it was he was going through at that time that made him want to write this film and make the movie, I actually had a lot more questions about that than I actually did about the film in itself, if that makes any sense. What I mean by this is this. It's very obvious that the character of Porter, played by Tom Zimbrod, is BrentBentman. Very obvious. I knew that after Brett had shared that insight about how this was a personal film and what he was going through and so on and so forth. So when I saw the movie for the first time, at least half of it, and then watching the second half, and then seeing it again for the second time, I picked up on, oh, that's Brett. This is all Brett right here. The thing that I had questions on were the other things that was going on in this film. Like, for example, the character of the captain, played by Robert Keith, who I thought was fantastic in this movie. And I'll get into his character in a little bit here. But I was wondering who that was meant to be in Brett's life, if that makes any sense. Same goes for the fortune teller in this movie too. Porter's wife, played by Brett's wife, Tiffany McDonald, or Tiffany Bentman, rather. My apologies. And then all the other characters as well too that you kind of come across here. The young man in the film who's meant to be rescued, who is the grandson of the captain, played by Robert Keith. And you also have the Retribe as well too, which is an Indian tribe that you come across. You come across two Native Americans in that film. So the questions that I had were really about who these people really were to Brett. Who were they inspired by? Like, what did they represent? Maybe they may not represent an actual person, but maybe they may represent circumstances, events, if that makes any sense. And he's using these individuals representing those particular periods in his life in some way or shape or form. That's what I really had a lot of questions about, and that's why I kept going back to watch the movie, because I was trying to figure that out in my head. Again, I never asked Brett, nor did he ever tell me about what it was he was going through, because it's not my business to know that stuff, nor would I ever want to pry into that here. But I just knew that there was so much that was going on that it was a lot of, it's a metaphor. This whole film is basically a metaphor. It's about a man who has committed some horrific acts in his past, and now he's paying for his sins. It's time to pay the piper, if you will. And the Buckskin Woods, in a lot of ways, is kind of basically hell on earth. The Retribe are basically coming after him for what he has done to them. And he is walking away from all that. He's a religious man. I don't know if he was beforehand, but in the beginning of the movie, he's in a church praying. And, he's definitely a man who is very set in his ways, if that makes any sense. But you learn that he had lost his children through an illness. His wife was ill, but she survived. And he just didn't want to go back doing his old job of being a fur trapper, so he ended up becoming a cook. And a pretty good one at that, according to the captain. So there was just so much about this particular character, that character's story, that was really intriguing for me personally. So that's gonna be my first positive with this for the film. The other thing I want to point out too, since we're on the topic of the character of Porter and his journey, Tom Zimbrod is amazing in this movie. I mean, he really is amazing in this film. This is by far, out of all the films I've seen him, and I've seen quite a few of the films that he's been in outside of B-22 as well too. There's quite a few films he's done that I've actually enjoyed that he's been in. But this is easily his best performance that I've ever come across here. Whitetail, I think, is his second best at the films I've seen so far. He's really good in this movie, but Buckskin, I think, is his absolute best. But there's no doubt in my mind that with what Brett had put him through, it got the best out of him. And there's no doubt, too, because Brett pretty much indicated that he knew that Zimbrod would be able to endure and be able to go through with it, because when you look at Zimbrod, he looks like he's a very thin man, but this guy is very physically capable of doing some pretty heavy shit. He's a stuntman in real life. He's done quite a few stunt work in theme parks, among other things as well too. Fight coordinator as well. I mean, a bunch of stuff. So this guy's very physically capable of doing a lot of things. So for him to go through the trenches of this character's journey, more or less, he was more than capable of pulling it off. But he definitely paid the price, because when you watch the movie, you can see that he's, in his prime. He's really well. He's healthy, and then he's just getting worse and worse and worse as the film progresses along the way, to the point where he's just had it. And it really paid off with this film, because it definitely brought an authenticity about this character's journey. And it's quite obvious that Brett really wanted to get that out of Zimbro's performance. So, easily, in my opinion, if it wasn't for Zimbro's performance in this movie, I don't know if the film would have worked as well. In fact, I'm pretty confident saying that the film wouldn't have worked at all. The other thing I want to point out too, in my opinion, is really the secret ingredient for this film. And that's Robert Keith's character, the captain in this movie. This, to me, in my opinion, is Robert Keith's absolute best performance that I've ever seen him do so far. I had a conversation with him on my show, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and I did tell him that I think that performance in Buckskin was your absolute best. The reason for that is because the character of the captain, this guy's an asshole. He's purely a businessman. He's all about the numbers. When it's revealed to him that his son had died, along with the men in going and doing their job and collecting fur and so on, and having to bring it back, the first thing he asked was how many, and then the guy that's telling him, I forgot the actor's name, but the guy that's telling him is like, all of them. He's like, no, I'm talking about the fur. Did we lose all of it? He's like, yeah, we did. They're all gone. And then he's like, all right, well, find the guys and bury them, or something to that effect. But then he reveals, but your grandson was with your son, and he's missing. And then all of a sudden, boom, he changes his demeanor. You can see his facial expression just changed from being like this, like, fuck those guys, and then to like, holy shit, my grandson. It's a very, very, I'm not an actor, but I know for a fact, doing something like that, where you have to be cold and stern and then instantly change from one emotion to the next and make it look good, it's not an easy thing to do. And he did that beautifully, in my opinion. At the same time, when you see a sympathetic side of him, you really do believe him. Like, you feel like, oh shit, I like this guy. Despite what you saw beforehand, you forget that, because he's so good in delivering that and conveying those emotional beats in the film. But then later on, you come to find out that he is just flat out a cold, heartless person to an extent. And when he talks to the fortune teller in this movie, which I'll get into in a little bit here, this fortune teller is basically telling him that I talked to Porter. Porter came to see me, actually, and I talked to him, and I told him, if you go to the Buckskin Woods, you will not survive. You did survive it the first time, but you barely made it. And you go back a second time, you will not come out. And then he's like, well, tell me about my grandson's future. And we don't know what the future was for the grandson, because that's where the scene cuts off. But it's clearly obvious that he's like, I'm going to find a way to make sure that my grandson comes back. I don't care what I got to do. I don't care how much money I got to spend. So he thinks that by spending money, all the problems will be solved. Why? Because people want money, and I got plenty of it. The thing about Keith's performance in this movie, in my opinion, is that he is absolutely brilliant in his performance. I hope that people that come across this film will take notice of these two actors' performance, and really everybody in the film. I think everyone in the film does a great job, in my opinion. But I'm going to highlight these two actors here. Both Robert Keith and Tom Zimbrod have been friends for decades at this point. They've worked together for so many years in the stunt world, and among other things as well too, especially with the B-22 productions. And when you watch this film, I'm sure they definitely had to, it was not difficult for them to really get into the moment, for them to really get, to show these characters a clash of personality, if you will, because they start off kind of in a good spot, and then later on as the film progresses, kind of like starts to deteriorate in a little way, in some ways. And, having these two actors working together, that they trust each other, where they can push the limits, where they have to pause and allow the other actor to get into the rhythm, and so on and so forth. Like, I can clearly see that with this performance, and I thought they were great together. So I hope to see some other films down the line with these two actors working again, because this movie, in my opinion, really kind of just shows the opposite spectrums of like the man who doesn't want to do it to the man who says you got to do it, and where greed and the sins of your past are clashing with each other, and they're conflicting with each other, and everyone's paying the price, and it's a price that no one wants to pay. Another thing I want to point out too, there are several different characters in this film. It's a very small cast of actors in this movie, but oddly enough, I felt like there's a lot of life in this film, because it's not just solely focused on Porter, played by Zimbrod. You have other characters as well too. There's a character who I'm terrible with remembering names, but it's and I'm sure I have the picture here, and I'm sure I'm going to say I have the image for you guys to see. But this one character has like this horrific burn on his face. That particular character, I think, was a really, really important character to have in this movie for a number of different reasons. But the first I'm going to point out is this. This is a character that wants to work with Porter because no one respects him, and he thinks that meeting up with Porter and working with him, that he'll earn the respect that he desires. And then we come to find out that he's also trying to earn a woman's love along the way too. Porter doesn't want to work with him, tells him you're too much of a baggage for me to have around here. I don't want you to be with me. Just go off and go back to the camp. The guy's really insistent on it and having come out there, and to the point where Porter's like, all right, well, he felt sorry for the guy and allows him to come with him. There is a beautiful scene in this movie in the woods where there's those two characters that were surrounded by a campfire, and they're just exchanging stories. They're talking about each other's past and so on, and it's a fantastic scene in my opinion about how these two characters, who've more or less never met each other, and they're able to have a really nice, genuine moment. And it's a really wonderful performance by the both of them. Fortunate that guy gets killed by with an arrow that hits him, and I thought that sucked. I was like, this is terrible, because this guy didn't do anything wrong, and yet he died. And that's where kind of, I think, more or less what the metaphor of this movie is about, how the Buckskin Woods is a place that you don't want to be around, because death is always going to be around, and it's always going to catch up to you. Another thing I want to point out about this review, about this film, I meant to say, is that the young man that is meant to be saved, I'll be honest, I remember, I think might have been like the 5th or 6th time I saw the film. There's a part of me that wondered, is this kid even real? Like, is he really there? And what I mean by it is this. You would think that the character, the young man, would want to come back home. And when Porter comes across him, kind of by chance, really, after he was, just out of it and just losing all sense of reality, if that makes any sense. If you watch the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. As I started watching the film more and more, I started to wonder, is this kid even real? Is he physically there with Porter? Or is Porter thinking this guy's there the entire time? And this is more or less kind of like the ghost of his sins catching up to him, and they're using the kid as a way to keep him trapped in there, and then the kid gets the upper hand, if that makes any sense. Obviously, that's not really the case, but I remember it crossed my mind. Because the character, the young boy, for me, represents more about... he's pretty much telling him, listen, you're going to be stuck here no matter what, but if you just stay here, you'll be fine. That's kind of the impression that I got. But the Ree are after you, the tribe. The Ree are after you. They want you dead. And I'm telling you, you should stay here. And Porter refused to listen. He's like, no, I have a job to do. I'm telling your grandfather I told your grandfather I'm going to bring you back, and that's what I intend on doing. And he's like, well, I'm not coming back home. And I was like, why would you not want to come back home? Do you really want to be out in the woods freezing up like that? It just didn't make any sense to me. But again, as I go back and watch the film, it started to make a little bit more sense to me. And I'm wondering, is the woods really, like, kind of in a weird way, is the woods possessing this kid where, it's kind of hard for me to explain, because there's one thing I keep saying about the film, is that there's a lot of questions that I have. He did say, though, that, the Ree want him dead, want Porter dead. But a part of me was just wondering, is the forest, the Buckskin Woods, really the the head boss, if you will. Like it's like a whole spiritual thing that occurs that I think is meant to be portrayed in this movie, where you don't see spirits, but I think the woods are more or less like the head honcho about, we are, now that you're here, you're trapped. And then you're seeing of certain things that are starting to unfold, that despite Porter trying to get out, he's unable to do so because he's getting more and more physically sick, and he's getting to the point of exhaustion where he really just can't carry on anymore. And in a lot of ways, the woods is breaking him down physically and mentally. And the kid is more or less kind of like is like a companion who's telling him, dude, you're not going to survive this here, so just stay here with me and we'll be fine. And I actually like that about the kid, and I like his involvement with the story. And I think the young kid who played the boy in the film did a really good job with his performance. One other thing I meant to point out earlier does have to do with the fortune teller. She's only in the film for very little, but when she's in the movie, she definitely does have an impact with the story, because she pretty much gave you the entire plot. She's telling Porter that you go back into the woods, you're going to die. And then as you start to learn more about this particular character, you realize that she has a lot of hatred towards, in this case, the captain. You can clearly see that there's a lot of bad history, a lot of bad blood. And I'm not saying that she has the bad blood towards the white man, if that makes any sense, but it's more about the bad blood that she's experienced. I think a lot of it having to do with the captain and the things that occurred in her life that clearly has affected her in a negative light. But somehow she's around, and because she serves a purpose, in my opinion, to him. Keep her around, keep her out there, but when I demand something from her, bring her here. And when you see that, it's quite obvious that he has a bit of control over her, and I'm not saying she's submissive to him, but she has to submit because she knows if she doesn't, there are consequences. That's what I picked up with that character, and there's a lot more that I want to see about this character here, which I'll get into later on with my negatives. But the interesting thing about that particular character is that I'm wondering who that character really is for BrentBentman. I thought at one point it was more like a conscience, someone saying, don't do this. If you do, these are the consequences. Pretty much laying it out for him. And when the character of Porter does not listen to her, I'm wondering what was Brett going through at that time for him to write this down, that what he felt was necessary for the story. So again, that's where the questions were coming up for me. The next thing I want to point out here too with this film is with the use of the Retribe. You hear them in the background, but you only see two members of the Retribe, the Native Americans. They unfortunately meet their demise in the film. When they die, one of them definitely informs Porter that, the woods own you. This land owns you. You do not own them. So get that through your head. And then Porter gets pissed off and kills him. That was a very integral part of the story. And, when I go back and see that scene, there's so much about that particular character that Porter kills. He kills both of those guys. But when he kills that one guy, it's very obvious that there's a history between them. And that's where you start to learn more about Porter's background with his relationship, at least with that scene between himself and the two members of the Retribe. And they know of him, and they know that you're stuck, and now you're fucked. And him killing that pretty much say, all right, that's it, you're never getting out. Hence where the kid comes in after the fact, and the kid's pretty much keeping him there and refusing to leave and telling him you got to stay here. So it's kind of a weird thing for me to point out, because again, that's kind of what I'm kind of picking up on here, where that particular set of that action right there that he had done in killing the two Native Americans of the Retribe. Then that's when the boy shows up and says, "We're not leaving," and then kind of lies to him. We got to go this way. This is north. No, this is south. No, we got to go east or west. Don't listen. Don't pay attention to the map, because the map is not going to do you any good. The woods can kind of play with you, can fuck with you a little bit and with your head. So, trust me, I know where I'm going, and pretty much giving them the runaround. Those were the consequences that started to follow through after what had happened with those two tribe members. So again, I'm starting to pick up more of that as I watch the film. I'm kind of going all over the place here because I'm just kind of winging it as I get into this review and talking about what I feel about the film. But I will point out two last things about my positives with this movie. The music. I thought the music was fantastic in this film. I really, really did like the score to this movie. There's something about the score that I thought was very fitting to create that atmosphere. And, here's the thing. I know that there are going to be some people who may think the score may be rather cheesy. I don't think that's the case at all, because it can be sort of loud at certain points. But I really do believe that the score in this film, especially towards the end, worked effectively for me personally. So I'm going to get into the ending here. So, as I mentioned before, the fortune teller had told Porter that you're going to die. And that's exactly what happens. Now, I will also want to point out, too, that Brett had told me before that he definitely had a different ending for this movie. And then literally the day of the shoot for that scene, he changed his mind and wanted to go a completely different ending that went more of a dark turn. I do remember the first time when I saw the film that I was expecting more or less kind of like a happy ending. Not necessarily happy endings like everyone's going to be, kumbayaing all together. I didn't feel that, but I felt like he's going to go through the trenches and really just get put through the ringer, but he's going to come out on top. And then he's going to be suffering from the injuries of what he's gone through, that he may not fully recover, but he's home. That's kind of what I was expecting. And that is not the case at all. In a lot of ways, the character of Porter is in purgatory. He's stuck in hell. He's just going through this cycle of this, I guess you could say that his spirit is trying to escape, but realizes, holy fuck, I'm stuck here. And I think that was something that really confused me about the ending, because I just didn't comprehend that. That's kind of what I got with this film when it comes to what the character Porter has gone through, where he has committed some horrible acts in the past. He was advised, if you do this, these are the consequences, and he didn't listen. His wife had told him, don't do that because the buckskin woods will tear you apart. He said, I've survived them before, I can survive them again. And then he had suffered the consequences to the point where now he's stuck in the woods and he's never leaving, and he's going to feel the heartbreak for the rest of his afterlife, if that makes any sense. And that's kind of a tough thing for me to accept as far as like what he had gone through, because honestly, I was expecting more or less like a happy ending. I really was expecting that. And I didn't get that at all with the movie, which is why I felt like that this movie was not going to appeal to everybody, because the way the film has ended just felt like I felt like some people would look at it as like, that doesn't make any sense. He dies and now he's like, he sees his wife and he was never there. I don't get it. And, upon rewatching the film several times, I understood it better. And I appreciated the story a lot more as a result of my repeat viewing, because I really did enjoy what I saw, but I also started to understand a bit more about what I was watching here. So, as regards to my positives here, this is where it's going to end for me, because I can go on and on about what I felt about the film, because there's a lot more that I want to say about the movie, but it's just going to take forever. So we'll end it on that here, but now we'll be getting into my negatives. So with my negatives, there's only a few things about the film that I'm going to point out here that I know I didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say I didn't like, but I felt like it's kind of hard for me to explain, because I know that I want to say what I want to say really isn't a negative. I kind of wish I was more careful about how I want to discuss certain areas about the film, what I liked, didn't like, and maybe I felt mixed about. I'm not gonna say I felt mixed about this here, but I'm only pointing this out as a negative because I felt like this particular movie deserved to be fully expanded on, because it's an 81 minute film, and there's so much compacted in this movie. It's very dense, that it never felt rushed. It never felt like it was being overcompensated. I didn't feel that way at all. I actually think it was handled rather beautifully in telling this narrative here at an effective pace. Understanding that they only shot this movie for, I would say, 8 or 9 days, I think is what I recall hearing. And obviously it's a very low budget film. to accomplish, in my opinion, what Brett and everyone else involved with this movie were able to accomplish. They've done a really good job. What I feel like is kind of a negative towards them for the film is that the film is too short. I think this is a movie that definitely needs to be expanded on further to be able to tell the story. I'm not saying that he's going to have to tell the story more what's the best way to say it? Like, I'm not saying that by expanding the story further, but he's going to have to give more explanations to how people understand what's going on. That's not what I meant by that. But to really expand on certain aspects of the character's story, especially with Porter, the fortune teller, I think that character, in my opinion, was a character that really deserved to have more time in the film. Because here's the thing, when Porter dies in the movie, I was curious to see what the fortune teller thought, knowing what had happened. Like, once it officially happened, what was her reaction to that? Did it have any real effect on her because of her involvement with the story? I wanted to see a little bit of that. We never got that with this movie, but the way she was using the film after the conversation she has with the captain, played by Robert Keith, was fine. I thought it worked well. Really, really good, I should say. But I wanted to see more from her perspective. We definitely do get to see the perspective of the wife, where she's waiting for her husband and more or less not knowing she's ever coming back, and figuring out later on that maybe, you know what, he's not coming back at all because it's been too long and I know what happened now. And I'm wondering if she also talked to the fortune teller as well too. There's a lot more that I kind of want to get out of that between those characters. And the captain, on the other hand, is a character that knew what the consequences were and just thought he could outrun the consequences with money. And those are those particular areas of the story that I felt like needed to be expanded further out to delve more into those particular characters' story and understanding more about where they were coming from. I mean, that's the thing. I do understand it, but I felt like it needed more time. Because this is a film, in my opinion, that if Brett had the opportunity to remake a movie, any of his films, I would hope that he would remake this film with more money, more resources, more time. Because I really feel like there's a lot that he could do with this film to really flesh out the story a little bit more. I'm not saying fleshing out better. I'm not saying that. Flesh it out more. Because there's so much that was going on that it just needed more time to breathe, to really expand on certain things, to allow the audience to really comprehend what's going on. Still have to figure it out for themselves in certain beats of the story, but really just to let things sink in a little bit more fluently, if that makes any sense. The other thing I want to point out as a negative of this movie is this. So, this movie I know has been a wonderful experience for me to check out. This is gonna be kind of a hard thing for me to say, but I really do think this is a fantastic film. It's a really underrated movie. But I know that this is what I'm gonna point out as a negative. I know that this film is going to have some critics. I don't know what the general consensus was. I would imagine there's people who do like the film, don't like it. And the critics out there that are going to say some negative things about the movie, if they're going to point out the negatives in the film, I really do hope that they point it out in respects to that, I understood this, or I didn't really get it, but it just wasn't for me. I didn't really like this part. I didn't really understand what was going on. And honestly, I started losing interest. But if they come at it in a sense to be really negative towards the movie by saying it sucked and they're being really dismissive about it, I think this movie does bring that out, if that makes any sense. And it's not a fault, in my opinion, of Brett or anyone else that has worked on this movie. I hope that people will give the film the time of the day and really take the time to watch the film and try to understand what was going on. And if they don't get it, fine, I understand that. But I really do hope that they try to give the film the time of the day. Don't necessarily mean to bring this in the negative with this part of the review, but I just knew that this movie would not be a film that people are going to probably say good things about, because they're going to look at this is stupid and move on. And I don't think this movie deserves that at all. Yes, film is subjective. I understand that. There's a lot of films that I watch and I think this is fucking garbage, but I don't like to say that anymore now because having to talk with a lot of people in the industry, I have a lot more respect with the filmmaking process and just doing anything in general. Even if I don't like it, I don't want to be disrespectful towards anybody with the work they've done. But then again, you might come across some people who say that was horrible. And And then in that respect, you can have a conversation that you could learn from what they were going through and what they were trying to pull off at the time, why they did it, and so on and so forth. And you have a bigger picture. But to not know what's going on and make that dismissive remark, I think is actually a disservice for a lot of people to do that. Give the film a time of the day, and if you don't like it on the merits that it just wasn't a good film for you, I get it. But if you like it, or I'm saying if you don't like it and start judging the film and just by being critiquing without no substance, there's really not a lot that I could really understand what your point of view is, other than when you say the movie sucks and it was terrible, but why? I hope I don't come off as trying to tell people what to do. That's not the case at all. But for some reason, this is the film that I started to understand that I know that Brett's movie is not going to be for everybody. And every film is not going to be for everybody. That's just a given. That's nothing unique about him as a director and a writer. I just know that it's not going to be for everybody, because considering this is a very personal film, and I'm not saying that please don't hurt his feelings. I'm not trying to tell you people what to do. But being that this is a personal film, I think that if you give the time out of the day to really listen to the story, understand what he was going for, you may have a different perspective of the movie. And I hope that's the case here. So with that being said, let's get into my ratings. As I said earlier, this is the film that I go back to the most out of all Brett's movies. I've seen it well over 25 times. I know for a fact I've seen it over 25 times, because there's so much about this movie that I start to unpackage when I go back and watch it again. Sometimes I go back to watch it again for a specific reason, just to make sure that I understood what I saw and if it made sense to me. And there'll be another time I'll watch it again just to see if I can see something else that I may have missed the 15th time I saw the film that I probably didn't get, in those previous viewings. So there's a lot of it's kind of weird for me to say, but it's fun for me to go back to watch this movie, even though the film is not necessarily a fun movie per se. But it's fun for me to go back to watch the film because there's so much that I'm picking up on that I really, really do enjoy. That I enjoy that unpackaging of this of what I saw and what I understand and what I didn't understand and what this scene meant and what this character meant, so on and so forth, the metaphors, all that stuff. And honestly, I'm not really a metaphor guy. I don't really like to watch films and have like a metaphor that this is meant to be that and that this particular. I mean, don't really care for that stuff. I enjoy it, but I don't really care for it all that much. But for some reason with this film, it really affected me to really take the time to pay attention to that stuff, to really understand what was going on for Brett to tell the story. And I enjoy the film a great deal. So for me, I give this movie a solid cheers. And those are my thoughts on the film. If you have seen the film, please let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. I would really love to hear you guys' thoughts on the movie. I hope you guys do give it the benefit of doubt. Hope you guys do sit through it. And if you didn't understand the first time, I hope you guys go back and watch it again to get a better analysis of the movie. And hopefully you guys can share your thoughts upon repeat viewing, because I would love to hear what your thoughts were the first time around, second time around, third time around. And hopefully you guys will come to enjoy the film. And if you don't, I still would like to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll also make sure to have the film available for you guys to click on, because I said earlier it's available on Tubi. It's also available on YouTube for free with ads, of course, in the description down below. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you hit the share and like button, hit the notification bell while you're down there. And follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram, New Release Wednesdays, on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter @TheNRW. And you can follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and my guest this week is the writer-director of Buckskin, Mr. BrentBentman, who is my first official guest that ever came back on my show. So I'm really excited about this here because how this came to be was because I had messaged Brett and told him, hey, I'm watching Buckskin, and I think this movie's fantastic. I am starting to love this movie. And he was like, thank you, man. A lot of people don't understand the movie, and it'd be great if we could probably like do something to talk about this film. If you want to have another conversation. I was like, yeah, let's do this here. So initially the idea was just to kind of go more in depth about Buckskin only. But then somewhere along the way, I started to change my approach with the conversation, where I thought, well, how about if we just talk about all the films you've done in the last 3 years, starting from 90 Feet from Home all the way through Bull Shark, and let's talk about what you were going through at the time and prior to making the film, making the movie, and then what your thoughts were since the films have been released. And we can go through each one of those films, and you can share your thoughts. I'll have some questions for me to ask you, and we'll go from there. And he agreed to that. there was a lot of wonderful insight from that conversation, and a lot of things that I've really learned about Brent himself that I hope that you guys will take from as well too. Because I know that there are a lot of people out there who watch his movies that will say shitty things about it, and I also know a lot of people who watch his film and say great things about his movies. You know, I'll be the first to admit, I am not a fan of every single one of the movies he's ever done. And when in the conversation, I talk about one of the films that he had directed and written that I didn't like, and we'll find out what that movie is in that episode. So I hope you guys do check out this episode. It'll be available on Friday as of this video uploaded here on the channel for you guys to check out. So make sure you'll be on the lookout for that. And also, if you haven't done so already, make sure you follow the show's social media accounts on Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool with WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for joining me here today. I hope you guys did sit through this whole review and you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, everybody, you guys stay safe out there, and cheers.